Hi Jackie, how are you going today?
Well, thanks, Trent.
If you could just give us a little bit of insight into your background and tell us a bit about the Veterans Wellbeing Summit.
Sure. So I'm not a veteran. I've got no personal immediate experience with the military. I do have, family and friends, obviously, but my background is actually in education and community engagement. That's where I spend most of my time, my gainful employment, as I call it. And I also work for a number of not for profits and work in the sense that I volunteer. My work with the Veteran Wellbeing Summit has come through my association as a director of Wellbeing Australia. But my background is, more than 30 years of experience in education. In that time, I've also covered wellbeing, mental health, and community engagement in both a professional and a volunteer capacity. And I do my work not just in Australia, but also in North America, New Zealand, Singapore, EU. Obviously now most of that is by Zoom. Uh, but I have been doing that for a long time. So it's actually not a big shift for me. And I think we were joking before that, for me, life's still pretty much the same at the moment, but everyone else is home. So there's a queue at the coffee machine. But a number of years ago, I did get involved in assisting with particularly veteran health and advocacy work, obviously in a volunteer capacity, and mainly around some of the policy area and also supporting veterans with some of the trickier issues that they were facing.
There is certainly some quite large issues in the veterans community at the moment. If you could describe a little bit more about how the Veterans Wellbeing Summit was rolled out and maybe let us know who some of the presenters were and give us an insight into the goals of the summit.
Sure. So a lot of my ideas come, people say they have their good ideas when they're in the shower. Mine actually came to me in the bath. I was thinking and had been having quite a number of quite very challenging conversations with people about, particularly at the time, this was around over across 2018 when there was, very, very high levels or rates of veteran suicide being reported. That was a particularly difficult year, 2018. And 2017, the year prior. I think when, people were sort of doing those sort of rough calculations, which sounds really gruesome, but it works out that we were losing about one either serving or ex-serving ADF per week. It's kind of the way it worked out. And while that sounds, and you look at that compared with, say, the United States, where they're losing between 22 and 23 a day, I would, I've always argued that, losing one is one too many. And so there was a poll really across the community. Well, what is it that we're doing that's working? We clearly had a lot of views about what wasn't working. People knew what wasn't working. And so in my discussions with people, I was just saying, look, if you were to run your own Veteran Wellbeing Summit, who would you invite? And so people could actually then rattle off very easily. These are my mates, could rattle off very easily, half a dozen names of people that they had associations with, where they had heard about success, where they had seen the evidence themselves, either through personal experience or with people that they knew. And they were seeing that there was, significant positive change in their lives. So I said, well, let's start tapping these people on the shoulder and let's pull, if we want to pull something together. So from that, from that conversation, so be very careful if I ever ask you a question, if you want to pull together something, who would you invite? And so from that, we actually then, I went back to the board of Wellbeing Australia and I said to my co-directors, look, this is something I think that fits beautifully with the work that we do, which is about proactively, being the proactive champions of wellbeing and helping people support and nurture their own wellbeing. So it's very much a solution-focused approach to the whole concept of wellbeing, and it's a very broad approach. I made it very clear that we didn't want to hear about what wasn't working. We wanted to only focus on the stories of success. No matter how small that was, it needed to be evidence-based. And so we pulled together, the board said, yes, absolutely, 100% behind it. But, we don't have any money for this. I said, no, well, that's no surprise because we don't have any money for anything most of the time. So I said, we're going to be doing it on a purely volunteer basis, and we will be, when we pulled together some people who did actually support us materially. So we've got fantastic support from Codex Digital, who help us with the website and with the hosting. We have the Resilience Centre. It's a firm that I do contract to I do sort of the data and analytics work for them. They helped us materially with the launch back in 2019, and also too they have provided a measurement tool for people to measure their own wellbeing. So that's being made available freely for veterans, their families, their partners, etc. And at the time, it was South Lake Macquarie RSL sub-branch. They actually kicked in some money, which was great. Huge sum of money, I think it was $6,000, which actually helped to get us operating with Zoom, helped to get some software for for editing the videos, etc., that we needed to produce as a result of the work that we were doing. A minimal amount of advertising and paid press releases that we put out, but in the main it was actually sort of some admin work as well. So we were actually able to contract somebody to do some of the admin work, the grunt work for us in that area. And it was a huge volunteer effort. We didn't want veterans to have to pay for any of this. We wanted them to be able to access it freely, which they did, and they did in significant numbers. So our themes around action, hope and transformation, everybody who was presenting, I spoke to them individually and said, this is what we want to hear about. How is the work you're doing contributing to those three themes? And we needed evidence. So we didn't say no to too many people in terms of presenters. We were very keen to explore. We didn't know what we were going to get for a start, but we were really keen to explore, the full range of options and those stories of success. We wanted people to be able to participate in the webinars, view the videos afterwards, participate in the workshop discussions, and either see an option for themselves that they thought was worth exploring, or be able to point a mate to something new. And so we did some measurement around that, which was pretty, and the results of that were pretty incredible. So my expectations of this were, I wanted to be quite modest about our expectations. So I thought that we'd be doing well if we had maybe 10 presenters over a week. We ended up getting 50 live presentations over 4 weeks, and we just kept extending the date out further and further as more people were applying to present. And we pulled this together. The bathroom, in the bath idea happened sort of about mid-June, and we had this up and running and launched on the 14th of August.
Oh, that's a very quick turnaround for something that large. 50 presenters is remarkable, especially when they're all volunteers.
All volunteers. We had academics. We had people who were working in very specific therapy areas. We had people working with. We had people from Animal Therapies Limited, for example. Talking about the role and the success with assistance animals.
That's so really interesting, because I actually went up and shot some video at Path of the Horse, and they used the equine therapy. It was amazing.
Well, we tried to get Dean on, actually, and because I think Channel 7 had run a program or highlighted his work, I think probably only a couple of weeks before we launched. Dean was basically flooded, I think, with lots of people wanting to have his time. But we did have a couple who do go to Dean's facility and do undertake equine therapy there. So they actually spoke, which was great, because we heard it from a consumer point of view about the difference that it was making for them and for the veteran himself, but also for his partner and the family, and the growth experience that they'd experienced and the calming effects, which were long lasting. So that's been those sorts of personal stories also made it incredibly real and accessible as well.
And how many veterans did you host over the 4-week period that it ran?
So participants, you're asking?
Participant, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we believe that we have reached and had participate 10,000 people over the 4 weeks.
Wow, that is very impressive.
That's phenomenal. And, you know, we had a way of measuring that, so that needed to be a unique hit in terms of someone who has signed up for a webinar or signed up for a workshop. Also, too, there were some other measures that we used to authenticate that it was, you know, a unique hit. So 10,000 people, 73% of that population identified as either serving or ex-serving ADF. And when we say it's a Veteran Wellbeing Summit, we don't make any distinction between those who've deployed or deployed either for, you know, warlike service or signed up as, you know, and never deployed. Okay, if they were part of the ADF, we classed them as veterans, so we didn't make that distinction. And yeah, so yeah, 73% identified as veterans. So the remainder were obviously partners of, and some of those also identified as being veterans, because there are those, you know, that are both. And then the rest was made up from, you know, allied health professionals and ESO services. So, you know, people that were working, not necessarily ex-serving themselves, but were working in the area of veteran wellbeing and welfare.
That's an amazing result, especially to turn it around so quickly from the idea in the bath to what it sounds like about 6 weeks later, that launching it live, a 4-week program with 50 presenters. It's amazing.
Yeah, I don't think we slept, Trent.
I can imagine. That is a big event to put on.
It was, and it just kept growing. You know, none of us thought it was going to be as successful in terms of reach. You know that. And when the numbers started coming in, I kept double checking the whole time, going, that can't be right. It can't be right. But we were able to verify that, you know, that was correct. And I kept going back to our organising committee and going, the numbers are just like a massive, you know, absolutely massive. And so, you know, what we were finding was that yes, people were signing up for the live events, so they were registering for the webinars, and we ran them roughly about 2 a day, and so they were there for the live event. But what we found was that they were also signing up in much greater numbers for the replay on demand. Mm. So, you know, we may have had, say, 20 to 30 in the live event, but the subsequent days, that just blew out to sort of, you know, 100, 200, you know, quite regularly, you know. And so what we did too, is we were very specific about getting some poll feedback on how people found the webinars. And the content, it wasn't your typical, you know, did you like the venue? Well, the venue was at home, so it was easy, or wherever you were. So if you're on your phone, or you know, you're watching the video afterwards, but it wasn't that. We wanted to know about impact and engagement. We wanted to know if people found the content useful. We wanted to know if they were motivated to do more or find out more. In terms of the content and their well-being.
Love that question. That's fantastic.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. And that motivation piece was actually really interesting. So we had, those results were incredible, and we might just take a bit of a break so that I can actually call those up for you. But those stats were pretty amazing. How am I feeling now, and how was I feeling before, and how am I feeling now in terms of some of the content was incredibly interesting. What was useful for us, from our point of view, in terms of the feedback, was that in the free form, where people were actually telling us, you know, in comments what was useful for them, they really liked that it was veteran centric. That, you know, and we did have people who were sharing their stories of success, who also had lived experience. So they, you know, they had served themselves, and they were now working in a capacity where they were actually also assisting, you know, ex-serving personnel. So that was a big plus. So we had a lot of people coming forward who were actually had served. The other thing that they found useful was that there was the anonymity. So they didn't have to register to actually watch the videos afterwards. They were watching the videos when we put them up onto YouTube and embedded them on the website. We curated all of that and made it freely available, which is still available now. Anyone can go and have a look at that. And they liked that anonymity. They liked being able to view it from home, view it at a time that suited them, in a place of safety if there were some of the issues that they didn't want to necessarily be in a big room with other people watching this or participating. But even in the live events, Trent, they could actually ask questions. So, we had a Q&A board, which you can have as part of, as part of a webinar platform. And people were asking really, really interesting questions, from to our presenters. So it enabled them to actually have that interaction without necessarily, identifying themselves. And that was a huge plus. So we looked at that as being a bit of a soft entry into the next step about finding out some more about some of the programs, therapies, options, programs, whatever that they could actually then participate in.
We've actually, in the work that we've been doing in Australian Veteran News, we've found that two things, that the first step is often the hardest, and also there seems to be so many options, and identifying the option that's going to be the best help to each individual veteran is quite difficult because there's a lot of noise out there in this space.
You're right. And I think that part of the difficulty is that when you've got, organisations like DVA, for example, they have to operate on scale. It doesn't make sense in government to be doing, a little bit of a program here, a little bit of a program there. And so their best effect is to do that, is to operate on scale. The difficulty with this is that it's a different puzzle for every person. So, the puzzle piece that works for you may not work for somebody else. And, if you've got too many missing pieces, where do you find those? How do you make them fit? How do you pull it together? So there is a requirement really around, the mental health wellbeing and suicide prevention that does require an individual approach. And so while, in 2019, the program that we run, we couldn't really say, yes, we definitely saved a life, other than we've certainly had people that have rung, contact us and said, this has actually made a huge difference for me, and one story, it was very early on, actually, it was after the first week. And I'm thinking, I'm sort of exhausted at this stage, thinking, oh my God, we've got 3 more weeks to go. Someone actually took time to find my number, which wasn't hard to find, but found my number, rang me and identified himself as having participated in one of the events, and said, it gave me the language to actually articulate what it is that I've been living with for the last 10 years post-discharge.
That's an amazing outcome, isn't it?
Yeah. And he was sobbing on the phone, and I was a bit, obviously a bit concerned. I said, are you okay? He said, oh yeah, I'm fine. It's just such a relief. He said, I now am able to talk about it because what they were talking about, it just clicked. It made sense. And I'm wondering why all of this time I was feeling so disconnected and so out of sorts and not able to marry up my experience in service, my experience outside on Civvy Street, and was just finding it so difficult around that identity, connection and purpose, meaning and purpose, and the discussion that was unfolding in the webinar just clicked for him. So I said, are you, again, are you okay? And he said, look, I'm about 2 beers away from talking to my wife about this stuff. And I said, well, I'm not sure about the beers, but that's awesome. And I said, just give me a text back to let me know that a bit later on that you're okay. So, that was one story. And we had lots of those sorts of stories where people were making, that personal, going that little bit further beyond the surveys and contacting us and letting us know that things had changed for them significantly as a result of just listening to something, just listening and participating in a webinar or watching it later, which was really heartening. I think that we were able to prove that this sort of thing has legs, that there is a way of reaching people who are not only geographically isolated, because we did find that there were pockets of people in regional and remote areas who were accessing the content. But also people that, even if they're in a big city or a big centre, they're still socially isolated. So having access to something that was free, that was available on demand or at a time that kind of suited them a little bit more was really, really helpful. It also meant too that we could we attracted some really interesting people who are presenting, who are doing work in research. Now, these people present at, conferences all the time, and they do great work. They're obviously the research work that they're doing, the practice work that they're doing, if they're working in practice as well, in private practice. But they do present at conferences, and I looked at the list of some of the conferences that some of our presenters had been in or were going to be in across 2019, and I'm thinking, there's not a lot of change out of $1,000 to go and attend a conference and to to participate and hear this sort of content. And that's beyond a lot of people. And a lot of ordinary people would be saying, well, you know what, I don't really go to these sort of conferences. Why would I go to that? Yet they very generously gave of their time to spend an hour with us and actually articulate in pretty useful checklist toolkit type format. These are things that we know work. And that was incredible.
That's amazing. I mean, I've presented a lot of conferences, been to a lot of conferences, and there's no doubt they're expensive, but like that free access and being able to access it remotely, we found the same thing when we ran a survey recently on Australian Veteran News, and we found the same. We found pockets of vets in remote areas, and we would have never they'd never get to a conference like what you discussed if they had to actually physically get there. It's amazing.
No, that's right. And I think too that just having it at times when people were at their best. So we found that if people were, so we just did a general straw poll on when's the best time for webinars, and mornings are not great. Okay, so if anyone out there looking to plan something, mornings no, don't do mornings. But afternoon, late, just after lunch, and early and evening, those are the times that we plotted as being optimum times for people to access, and that worked out quite well for us. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, just the accessibility is a big thing, and people were able to watch it, with their families or with their partner, and that was a big plus as well, that they could actually start to hear and see some of the things that they've been talking about, and actually started a lot of conversations and a lot of connections beyond that.
Amazing. It certainly sounds like that you helped quite a few veterans put some of the missing puzzle pieces in place.
We did. But from the feedback too, Trent, which was really interesting, is that last year's we went in and created an impact and engagement index and applied that to each of the sessions and the feedback that we received, and came up with the sort of which sessions were more valuable in terms of usefulness, which is a usefulness measure that we had. And there were two things that came out very, very clearly. Veterans wanted to know, wanted skills and knowledge about how to nurture, manage and improve their own wellbeing, their mental health, etc. And the partners wanted exactly the same thing. They wanted to know how it is that what they could do in terms of really practical skills to manage their own wellbeing, that of their partner, who was the ex-service person, and their family, right? And very clearly, the issue around suicide prevention came up as a theme regularly. So one of the things we did with the organising committee was say, okay, well, what can we do? And one of our presenters last year is a chap called John Hendon. John is a psychotherapist from the UK, has done lots of work with military across Europe and the US as well, and also training welfare workers. So in the UK, he spent many, many years training all of the military welfare workers in the UK. And his approach is really quite different. It's a solution-focused approach. It's about identifying what's working, doing more of it. And one of the great things I love about John is that he is quite comfortable sharing his expertise and techniques with people who are not from the psychology, psychiatry, medical profession, right? So he does train those people, but he's also very keen to work with people who are not in that area. And so I actually went, and John was out in Australia last year and up in Toowoomba, and I went up and did his civilian version of combat and operational stress recovery, and thought, this is it. This is the stuff that we need. So I began talking with him at that point, saying, organising to get him out here. We had him coming to Sydney. We had two-day workshops with going to be one in July. In Sydney, we were also going to be going to Tasmania because we had, a lot of interest from Tassie. And the interesting thing from that was that people were really drawn to, what difference can I make? Because one of the things that's really interesting is that, if you're talking with a peer or talking with a mate or a friend, and, you can't say to them, hold that suicidal thought while I go and get an expert. So, these really practical skills were something we thought we've got to make this opportunity available to everybody. So thankfully, our sponsors, and we've got lots of partners this year, we've got lots of RSL sub-branches that have come on, and I'm very happy to share that information to recognise their contribution. So I'll send that through to you so we can hopefully pop that up on the website as well. So we've got RSL sub-branches, we've got RSL Tasmania, the Tasmanian government has supported us. We've got the Veterans Benevolent Fund as well have supported us. So, this has meant that we've been able again to provide the training in those two areas: solution-focused suicide prevention, solution-focused approaches to combat and operational stress recovery at no cost to our target group of ex-serving, their partners, their family members. So we did have others who were interested in the area, who we did ask for a small fee to help cover some of the additional costs, but we made that substantially available, free. And we ran them all because of COVID. We ran all of that online. So not last week, the week before, we ran two-day workshops. John was delivering in the wee hours of the morning from the UK, and we had over 200 people register for those workshops across the week for the two-day workshops. So interesting discussions. The feedback from that has been incredible. We've had a measurement that we're looking at in particular there was about confidence levels. So what's your confidence level before we started this workshop in terms of your ability to steer a conversation where somebody has expressed suicidal thoughts to a positive conclusion? What are your confidence levels in terms of somebody who's struggling with, say, operational stress? In the regular language, people would refer to that as post-traumatic stress disorder. We're trying to change the language a bit there and call it an injury or post-traumatic stress. So what's your confidence level like at the moment in terms of steering somebody who's having those struggles and those challenges to a more positive conclusion? And then we check them again post-workshop. Now, the data is still very new and we need to do a little bit more in it, but there has been a significant increase in confidence pre and post.
It's amazing.
It is amazing, yeah, and statistically significant. So it's not just oh yeah, I'm better. Yeah. I feel more confident. We actually got people to scale before and after. And I'm fortunate. I've got a good relationship with Macquarie University here in Sydney, and I've got some students who will be undertaking some research for me on this across August to November of this year, where they're going to be going back to each of the participants and asking them some very specific questions about how their skill level is. Have they been able to implement and use some of the techniques that they learned as part of the workshop? and get a measure in terms of the embeddedness, I suppose, in terms of the thinking and the framework of solution focused and working with those two areas. So
it sounds like we'll have to do a follow-up interview after that research has been completed, so we can get some more insights into the results. That'd be amazing.
Very, very happy to share. Very, very happy to share. And the other, and so for 2020, so 2020, everyone's going 2020, the year we'd rather forget. And we're only in July, but we've had 2 weeks of the summit so far. We've decided we'd spread it out across the year. So we had first week in March, second week in June, and we've got the third week of the summit coming up in October, November. And so we're running our programs of webinars there. So we've got those, we've got the recordings for what we've actually already run are all available on the website. But interestingly, this time around, we've also been running workshops. So we've had the team from Mind Right and Story Right running taster courses around their transition workshops that they run, because it's a team they're based in South Australia. So that's been terrific and really, really well received. So they've got 2 programs in operation and 1 coming. So Story Right, Mind Right, Story Right. So they're the top and tail, and Mission Right's the piece in the middle that's still being developed. But terrific team there, working on helping that transition, whether it's transitioning now, that there is an imminent piece, an imminent timeline, or whether people have transitioned from the military some time ago and still haven't got their story together, and it's a really excellent program. So I had the privilege of sitting in, and just listening to them deliver with small groups in the workshops, which is fantastic. And the other thing that we've been able to do this year too is to support the group at PTSD Resurrected, so Andy and Zoe Cullen. They're a charity up in Queensland, but they are the providers of the Reboot program, which is an intensive PTSD recovery program. And because of COVID, the face-to-face programs that they were going to be running obviously just couldn't happen. So I'd been at them for a while saying, come on, guys, you've got to get it online. You've got to get it online. And they're resisting. Anyway, finally, I think they just thought, well, we'll do it because it'll keep Jacqui quiet. But we did actually bring it online. And, we were able to produce, and so actually working with the team doing the technical side behind the program, and they were running it. I said, I just want you to run it like you normally run it. Just you don't worry about putting people into breakout rooms or discussions or anything like that. All the technical stuff, I'll deal with all of that. You just do what you do. We had the first time we ran, so it was the beginning of June. It's the first time they'd run online, and I was just so impressed with the ability to create community really quickly with people that, have clearly got big struggles in their life. But also too, I think what was an interesting part of that process was that we were actually able to bring together people to the program who would normally never have access to that program. So you've got to have, obviously with their funders and so on, you've got to have a minimum number to make a program viable to run in any location. So some of these people were located in places where you'd never get that viable number, and nor were they ever going to be in a position in their current frame of mind and state of mental health, were they going to be able to travel to a centre easily, and also too, some of them had, carer responsibilities. So they had young kids, or they were looking after, another relative, or they were in rural areas and you can't go and leave your animals at that time. So, we had people from every state and territory.
Amazing. It's finally, I've seen COVID push a lot of businesses and a lot of not-for-profits online, and they've all started to realize the scale and the reach that they can get online. I think a lot of people were stuck thinking that they needed to deliver programs face to face, but online delivery is fantastic, and it's of course better than no delivery at all.
You're right. I don't think it replaces face-to-face. I think there is clearly that chemistry and human interaction that, and the magic happens when you're actually, together with people. But there is a place for this, and I could certainly see, everyone was a little bit nervous about how that would work. And I kept saying, "Oh no, it'll be great, it'll be great, it'll be great." And behind them scenes, going, "Please be great, please be great." Fingers crossed, big time. But it worked. It really did work, and it was so successful that we're running another one in August.
That's fantastic.
So, yeah, which is great.
So I think you sort of touched on it a little bit earlier, but why don't you think the entities like the DVA and the RSL are running similar initiatives?
Oh, look, I don't know whether I want to try and crystal ball as to why particular organisations are acting or doing or acting in a particular way. Look, we did approach DVA. I did have quite a number of email exchanges and a couple of telephone calls with people within DVA who would normally be responsible for these types of programs. And we didn't want money. So this was last year, we didn't want money. And I said, look, and I know that's probably an unusual request when people go to DVA, but what we wanted to do was have some sort of endorsement, or even just get them to acknowledge the work that we were doing, and if there was any way that they could find to support us, either through personnel or whatever. And I think that because we were, quite rightly, they were cautious about who we were. And we're not, and Wellbeing Australia is certainly not trying to become another ex-service organisation. Australia does not need another ESO being set up. There are plenty of them. And I'm on the record as being quite the Joint Parliamentary Inquiry into ADF transition. I'm on the record as saying we don't need another one, but I think that there's they were quite cautious. They just said, we need to make sure that veterans are safe, that, do you have any experience in this area? And I look, and I understand why they were asking the questions. The answer to all of that is yes, they're safe because they're in their homes and in the safest place they can possibly be. It's opt-in. We weren't forcing anybody to be part of this. We were offering a smorgasbord of options and things for people to dip in and out of as they felt they wanted to. And do we have experience in this area? Well, yeah, we do. Okay, so there's the personal experience, but also too the organising committee is also made up of not just the directors from Wellbeing Australia, but also too we've got half a dozen ex-serving personnel who make up the organising committee from all three services. So, there is the experience and the understanding there. So, that's fair enough. But what did happen, which was really awesome, was that, at the end of last year, so after we'd actually finished our live event, which went from August to September, our partner, our ESO partner at the time, which was South Lake Macquarie sub-branch, RSL sub-branch, they actually applied to have the curated website. So the website with all of the video content on there, the curated website, they applied to have that as an acknowledged and registered Veterans Health Week event.
Fantastic.
So, which was great because it did have that. It did touch on all of the elements that are important in terms of, the well-being and health of veterans. So there was a lot of really rich content there. So that was great. So we were a registered event, even though it was a virtual event and it was an event that had already technically happened. The live event had already technically happened. But it meant that, a lot more people then were actually, again, accessing the videos and sharing them and that sort of thing. So that was great. That was really awesome. And in terms of the RSL, I'm not look, there's, you can read, you guys have written about what's going on in RSL land. And certainly, in the other states, there's been some, less than stellar history that's been uncovered there. Look, all I can say is that the sub-branches that have been working with us have been fantastic. The level of support, not just in terms of the financial, support that particularly that they've given us this year, and there are a number of them, but just in the words of encouragement, in their willingness to tap people on the shoulder where they know that there has been someone working really with great success in their local area, because they're very tuned into their local area, the local sub branches. They know exactly what's going on with their members. They know what's going on in their community. They're very, very well connected, and for the most part, the ones that I'm certainly in touch with, they are very well connected and active. So they were able to actually point people in our direction to say, you've got to talk to this crowd. They're doing a great job, and so that's how we would actually then uncover a new story of success and get a presenter involved. So there's a lot of really good stuff happening locally. I don't know. I can't even begin to fathom what's happening at sometimes at the next level up, right? And that's the tricky part. Having said that, RSL Tasmania is one of our supporters this year, is one of our partners this year. They're really keen, talking with the team there. They're very keen to be getting, the sort of exposure and training and knowledge and skills that we're able to put together. We were meant to be taking the live workshops down there, but obviously that didn't happen. I think they closed their borders before even the national border was closed. But they've been incredibly supportive, and certainly the minister down there, Guy Barnett, has been, and his team have been incredibly supportive as well. So there's I think there's hope. There's good people doing good things. I think we've just got to try and keep harnessing what's working well and highlighting that and supporting too, where we see the things that are going on that aren't right. Yeah, okay, there's a role to call it out, but there's also a role for us to be taking a high ground, the moral high ground on things, and show people that there are better ways of working, And one of the things I think is a useful lesson that I think speaks to that point too, Trent, is that we were able to pull people, because we're not a political group, we're actually able to pull people together into a room, even if it was a virtual room, who wouldn't normally be working together. And I think this is where we would like to see things go from here, is that, there are lots of people doing really good things. We don't need to keep reinventing the wheel.
It does seem to be quite siloed, doesn't it?
Oh, there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of reinventing the wheel, not just within Australia, but also to, we can stand on the shoulders of others with the experience that they've got overseas. So, I'm in touch with the team from Purdue University in Indiana, who are doing amazing work researching the effectiveness of therapy dogs and PTSD assistance dogs. Now, they're using pound puppies. They're not going and breeding their own dogs for this purpose. Now, I understand why they're doing that here. I totally get it. And the work that's happening at La Trobe University is awesome. Love you guys. Love the work that you're doing, okay? But we don't need to be doing this. We don't need to be reinventing the wheel, The work that Maggie O'Hare and her team are doing over there is fantastic. They've got research papers out. They've got this peer review. There's a lot of evidence that things are working. And the reasons why they're working too. There's some, really, really good analysis that's happening there. So why wouldn't we be using that and standing on the shoulders of the work that they're doing? And they're very happy to, to talk to anybody. They talk to me. I mean, who am I from Australia to call them and contact them and ask them what they're doing? But also too, we've got some, we're in contact. One of the groups that are going to be presenting in the October-November week that we're running is a group that's working with veterans in LA. Now, LA has got 300,000 veterans, population of 300,000 veterans. Their issues are on a scale, huge scale over there. But Mark Mitchell is the chap he'll be heading up one of our webinars, and he's pulling together a team of veterans who are working across a whole range of areas in that area in LA, and the success that they're having. So we'll have that story, and they're talking about Veterans Hubs. So we're talking about Veterans Wellbeing Centres here, Veteran Hubs being established. They're doing the same thing, and they're probably further down the track in some ways than us. So why wouldn't we hear the stories about what's working well there and going, hey guys, this is something that we can do here, So
those shared learnings are so important. I mean, there's no use beating a new path when there's a path 1 foot to the left of you.
Exactly. And there's a lot of that goes on. So, sharing stories, sharing expertise. But the other thing too, Trent, is that we are, it's a finite pool of funds. A lot of people squabbling about trying to get their share of the funds. And there's got to be a better way of working. Why would you reinvent a service in your locality if there's something similar that you can access where someone's doing it really, really well, not that far away, or where it can be delivered by, a fly in, fly out, or drive in, drive out, as we might be doing now. Why wouldn't we be, sharing that expertise? And I think that, perhaps one of the lessons of COVID is that, yes, you can, yes, we can do that stuff. Why wouldn't we be doing it virtually? I mean, just as an example, one of our presenters last year, and has remained as a close contact with us since the presentation, as a telehealth provider. Now, one of the things that we were constantly being told was that veterans don't like telehealth, they won't access telehealth. Well, we ran surveys, that were telling us that if they had to wait more than a week, yes, telehealth, we would, if the matter was urgent, telehealth would be an option, and now, of course, telehealth is well, for some people, is the only way now that we can actually access some of those services. So, we know that there's buy-in for online telephone support, new ways of working, things that could only ever be done face to face. Now people are finding we're an inventive species. We adapt, and we accommodate, and we find solutions to things. So this is one of them.
I've found it very interesting. During COVID, we do a lot of online data sharing and content creation, and the one thing that I found is that all of a sudden, people's reasoning around if they'd go online to access information has changed completely, because they were forced to do it and they realized that it's actually very helpful and quite easy to access. They just needed that one last shove to get them to do it the first time, and all of a sudden it's opened up a whole new world for them.
Yeah, it's like the best idea they ever had.
It is the best idea they've ever had. So how do veterans and ex-service organisations get involved?
Well, lots of ways. The website is the main container for all of this. So it's all the W's, veteranwellbeingsummit.com.au. And on there, they can see the tabs. So if they want to actually just register to get the updates, we do send out updates in terms of what's coming up in terms of the programs. Just as an example, we sent out yesterday an update from one of our presenters from last year, who's doing PhD study on identity and purpose. So we're able to link them and the work that they're doing back out to the community that's been involved with us through the summit. So so that you'll get updates like that. We also are encouraging people still to put in applications or abstracts for to be a presenter, and there's lots of ways they can do that. So there's the webinar presentation. There's also the ability to run workshops. So if there are things that they do or courses that they offer as part of their regular work, we can facilitate that online. So if they would like to do that, there's an option there to actually apply to deliver that way. We will take video presentations. So we've had a number of those. So, for example, we've had exercise physiologists give us a video where they went and interviewed their staff about the benefits of EP, etc., and then also with their clients, with their vet clients, which was entertaining and incredibly useful too, for people to see that you don't have to be, you know, a gym buff to be involved in this sort of thing, and the benefits are huge. So there's those sorts of video presentations that can be done, and also storyboards. So we're really happy to take a story in text and photos as well. So there's lots of options there. But just to register to become, you know, when you see the events, just put your name down and come along. It's very simple. There's no charge, and you know, we welcome anybody. Obviously, our target group, you know, serving, ex-serving, their partners, family members, and support network, but also to anyone who has an interest in this. And really, you know, as a you know, someone asked me, what am I getting from this? And at the time they asked me, I said, oh, you know, no sleep and anxiety. But, you know, the reality is that, you know, while I don't have a connection and an immediate family connection to the military, I've got other family connections, but not an immediate family connection. Someone explained to me, you know, someone said, well, actually you do, you know, you're an Australian citizen. You're, you know, one of the 3 parties signed up on the military contract. You actually should have an interest, and we do have an interest and an obligation. So anyone who has an interest is very welcome to participate that way as well.
That's fantastic. Now, I think you should just give us that web address one more time.
Sure.
And just remind them that it's free to register again, because I think that's one of the most important aspects.
Yeah.
And also just let us know when the next 2 weeks of activity are for this year's.
Sure. So it's veteranwellbeingsummit.com.au. And the next Veterans Health, it's actually in Veterans Health Week, so it starts on the 26th of October and goes through to the 1st of November. And we also are running a PTSD Resurrected's reboot program on the 18th of August. So if people are interested in that, they can contact us via the Veteran Wellbeing Summit.com.au website, and we will put them in touch with all of the groups that are providing programs.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for your time today, Jacqui. It's been really enjoyable to learn more about the summit, and sounds like that you've been doing amazing work in that space, and we look forward to seeing what comes next. And also, we definitely need to catch up after you've received the results of the research that's happening at the university.
Yeah, definitely. No, I'd be delighted to come back and share that. And of course, we've been very open about our data sharing as well. So we've got all of that information is there in one of our sessions that we've run earlier. So if people are interested and want to have a look, it's all there and all recorded, and people can access it freely. So thanks very much, Trent. Thanks for your interest.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Bye now.